"Your daughter is down there," said the girl in front of the well, "but when they look, they discover something terrible. Comment what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and tell me which city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help." The Italian marble on the floor of King & Sons construction reflected the golden lights of the chandelier when the girl's bare, dirty feet touched its cold surface. Arthur Coleman King, 52, looked up from the contract spread across his mahogany desk and felt the air escape his lungs. The child was no more than 4 years old, with tangled brown hair and green eyes that seemed to hold secrets impossible for her age. "How did you get in here?" he asked, watching his secretary Caroline rush after the little intruder. The 45-year-old woman gestured nervously, clearly embarrassed by the security breach. The girl ignored the question and walked directly to Arthur's desk, leaving trails of dirt on the immaculate floor. Her eyes fixed on his with a disturbing intensity. "Your daughter is down there in the well at the old farm." The silence that followed was deafening. Arthur felt the world spin around him, as if the floor had disappeared from beneath his feet. It had been 6 months since Julia Hope King, 19, had disappeared without a trace. 6 months of sleepless nights, private investigators, and posters spread across the state of North Carolina. 6 months of guilt, corroding his soul like acid. "What did you say?" he murmured, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Julia is in the well. She needs you now." The child's voice sounded strangely mature, laden with a sadness that shouldn't exist in someone so young. Caroline approached cautiously. "Mr. King, should I call security? The girl might be confused or—" "No." Arthur stood up abruptly, knocking over his leather chair. "What well? What farm are you talking about?" The girl tilted her head slightly. "Blackwood Farm. The back well, near the stones with the strange drawings. She's hurt, but alive." Arthur's heart raced. Blackwood Farm was a rural property he had bought 15 years ago, located 40 miles from Charlotte. Julia had disappeared precisely when she was visiting that property, where she planned to create a rural tourism project. Her car had been found abandoned on the dirt road leading to the farmhouse. "How do you know this?" "Who are you?" he asked, circling the desk to get closer to the child. "My name is Amethyst, Amethyst Stone." She pronounced each word with care, as if each syllable carried a special weight. The name Stone echoed in Arthur's mind like a distant echo. There was some familiarity there, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what. His thoughts were interrupted by the urgency of the situation. "Carolyn, cancel all my appointments. Call the fire department and tell them it's an emergency at Blackwood Farm. I need a rescue team immediately." He grabbed his car keys, his hands trembling slightly. "Sir, are you sure? How can you trust the word of a child?" Arthur looked at Amethyst again. There was something in those green eyes that convinced him completely, an absolute certainty that transcended logic. "You're coming with me," he said to the girl. "I knew you would," she replied, as if she had been expecting this moment. The drive to the farm was made in tense silence. Arthur drove his black BMW through the North Carolina roads, the speedometer marking dangerous speeds, while his mind buzzed with questions. Amethyst remained quiet in the passenger seat, observing the mountainous landscape with a disturbing familiarity. When they arrived at Blackwood Farm, 3 fire department trucks were already positioned at the back of the property. Chief Robert Evans, a robust man of 48, approached Arthur with a grave expression. "Mr. King, we've located the well you mentioned. It's about 60 feet deep, and there are signs someone has been there recently. And Julia, we're going down now. I ask that you keep your distance for safety." Arthur watched the firefighters prepare the rescue equipment, his heart beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. Amethyst remained by his side, small and silent, but radiating a strange confidence. "How did you know?" he asked quietly. "She told me where she was," the girl answered simply. Who told you? Before Amethyst could answer, shouts from the well caught everyone's attention. We found her. There's a person down here, unconscious but breathing. The next 2 hours passed in a blur. Arthur watched, paralyzed between hope and terror, as the firefighters worked meticulously to rescue whoever was at the bottom of that dark hole. When they finally hoisted a stretcher with a female figure, he immediately recognized the blonde hair he had combed when she was a child. "Julia!" he shouted, running toward the ambulance. She was alive but unconscious, with superficial cuts and signs of severe dehydration. The paramedics worked quickly, checking vital signs and preparing her for transport to the hospital. "Is she going to be okay?" Arthur asked, holding his daughter's cold hand. "She needs immediate medical care, but her vital signs are stable," the paramedic replied. As the ambulance prepared to leave, Arthur turned to thank Amethyst. The girl was watching Julia with an unreadably sad expression. "Thank you," he said, kneeling to her height. "You saved my daughter. How can I ever repay you?" Amethyst looked at him with those piercing green eyes. "She won't remember the last few months. The pain was too great." "What do you mean? When she wakes up, ask her about the stones with drawings. Ask about the bonfires. Ask about the grey-haired woman who sang old songs." Amethyst began to walk away. "I'm leaving now. Wait. Where do you live? Who are your parents?" The girl stopped and looked back one last time. "I don't have anyone, but maybe now that will change." She disappeared among the farm's trees, leaving Arthur with more questions than answers. When he arrived at the hospital, his immediate concern was Julia, but a part of his mind couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious child who had changed everything. 3 days later, when Julia finally woke up, her first words confirmed what Amethyst had predicted. "Dad, what happened? Why am I in the hospital?" She had no memory of the last 6 months. Julia's total amnesia left Arthur desperate. For a whole week, he tried to awaken any memory of the past 6 months, but his daughter looked at him with genuine confusion every time he mentioned her disappearance. It was as if a piece of her life had simply been erased. "Dad, are you saying I was missing for half a year?" Julia asked during a consultation with neurologist Dr. Frederick Conrad, 55. She was sitting on the hospital bed, her blonde hair still messy, but her overall appearance surprisingly healthy considering the circumstances. "The tests show no head trauma that would justify the memory loss," Dr. Conrad explained to Arthur in private. "It's possible it's dissociative amnesia, caused by extreme psychological trauma. Her mind may have blocked the memories as a protective mechanism, but will she recover these memories? It's hard to predict. It could be temporary or permanent. Forcing the issue could be counterproductive." Arthur left the hospital more frustrated than before. As he drove through the streets of Charlotte, his mind inevitably returned to Amethyst. The child had vanished like a mirage, but her words echoed constantly. Ask about the stones with drawings. Ask about the bonfires. He decided to return to Blackwood Farm. This time, he meticulously examined the area around the well where Julia had been found. To his surprise, there were indeed stones with strange engravings, symbols that looked very old, almost primitive. Intertwined circles, figures resembling birds, and what could be representations of people. More disturbingly, he found remains of recent bonfires. Ashes that couldn't be more than a few weeks old, scattered in 3 different places around the well. Someone had been there regularly. "Who the hell did this?" he muttered, photographing the evidence with his phone. 2 days later, while Julia was recovering at home, Arthur received an unexpected call from Caroline. "Mr. King, that girl is here again." Amethyst. He rushed down to the construction company's reception. Amethyst was sitting in the same armchair where important clients usually waited, her small legs dangling in the air. This time, she wore clean clothes, a blue skirt and white blouse that looked new, but cheap. You disappeared, he said, approaching cautiously. I had to take care of some things, she replied with that disconcerting maturity. How's Julia? She doesn't remember anything from the last few months, exactly as you said. Arthur sat in the armchair beside her. How did you know? Because I was there when it happened. Where? At the well? Amethyst shook her head. Not at the well. At the house, with Grandma Hope. The name struck Arthur like a lightning bolt. Hope. He had heard that name before, but couldn't place where. Who is Grandma Hope? The lady who took care of Julia during the months she was missing. That's impossible. Julia was lost, alone. She wasn't. Amethyst interrupted him, her green eyes fixed on his. She was being cared for, protected, loved. Arthur felt a chill in his stomach. By a woman named Hope? Hope Stone. My great-grandmother. Stone. Again that surname that echoed with familiarity in his mind. Where does this woman live? Lived. She passed away last week. Passed away to where? Amethyst looked at her own small hands, to the place where people go when they can't stay here anymore. The child was talking about some form of final departure, but in a way that avoided the word Arthur didn't want to hear. And now you're alone. Now I'm looking for my new home. Arthur studied the girl's face. There was a carefully hidden hope in her eyes, as if she were testing the waters before diving in. Where have you been sleeping? In safe places. I know how to take care of myself. A 4-year-old child shouldn't have to take care of herself. He took a deep breath, making a decision that would change his life again. Do you want to come home with me? Get to know Julia properly. The smile that lit up Amethyst's face was the first genuinely childish expression he had seen on her. Can I really? Of course. But first, I need to make some calls. Adoption process. Social services. There are no records of me in the system, Amethyst said quickly. Grandma Hope always hid me from the authorities. Why? Because she knew that one day I would need to be free to help. Help with what? Amethyst stood up from the armchair. The truth needs to come out, and I'm the only one who can tell the whole story. That afternoon, Arthur took Amethyst home. His residence in Charlotte was a 2-story mansion with carefully planned gardens and a pool that reflected the blue North Carolina sky. Julia was on the back porch reading a book when they arrived. Julia, I want you to meet someone, Arthur said, guiding Amethyst to where his daughter was resting. Julia looked up and her face transformed completely. It wasn't exact recognition, but something deeper, an immediate and inexplicable connection. Hi, she said softly. You're the girl who helped your dad find you. Amethyst completed. Thank you. Julia stood up and without hesitation hugged Amethyst. Thank you so much. What happened next surprised Arthur profoundly. The two girls, one 19 years old, the other just 4, began to talk as if they were sisters who had grown up together. There was a naturalness in their interaction that defied logical explanation. Do you like to draw? Julia asked. I like it a lot, especially birds and stones with symbols. Julia paused, a strange expression crossing her face. Stones with symbols. That reminds me of something. Reminds you of what? Arthur asked immediately. I don't know. It's like a dream that's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't grasp it. Amethyst looked meaningfully at Arthur. The memories will come back slowly when she's ready. That night, after Amethyst had fallen asleep in the guest room, Arthur talked to Julia about the possibility of adoption. What do you think about having a little sister? Dad, there's something strange happening, Julia said, her voice low. Since I woke up in the hospital, I have this feeling that there are important pieces of my life missing. And when I see Amethyst, it's like she's a piece of a puzzle I didn't even know I was trying to solve. Do you think you knew each other before? I don't know. But there's something familiar about her, in the way she talks, how she looks at me. It's almost as if she knows things about me that I've forgotten myself. Arthur decided not to mention what Amethyst had told him about Grandma Hope. There were still too many unanswered questions, and he needed to investigate more before overwhelming Julia with information that could confuse her even more. The next morning, he hired a private investigator, Richard Miles, 42, who specialized in family cases. I need you to find out everything about a family named Stone, specifically an elderly woman named Hope Stone. And I also want all the records on my property, Blackwood Farm. Is there any specific connection I should look for? Richard asked. There might be a link between this family and the farm, and possibly with my daughter's disappearance. While waiting for the investigation results, Arthur watched fascinated as the relationship between Julia and Amethyst grew. The child seemed to know details about Julia's tastes and preferences that even he didn't. She knew she liked chamomile tea before bed, that she was afraid of thunder since she was a child, that she loved hearing stories about her ancestors. How do you know I like chamomile tea? Julia asked one night. Grandma Hope always made it for you, Amethyst replied naturally. When Amethyst seemed to realize she had said too much. In dreams. She told me about you in dreams. But Arthur had caught the hesitation in her response. There was more to this story, much more than Amethyst was revealing, and he was determined to find out the whole truth. A week after Amethyst's arrival at the King House, strange events began to disturb the apparent tranquility. Julia woke up one full moon night with the feeling that someone was watching her. When she turned on the lamp, she found Amethyst standing at the foot of her bed, her eyes glazed and fixed, as if she was sleepwalking. Amethyst. What are you doing here? Julia whispered, careful not to startle the child. There was no response. Amethyst turned slowly and walked towards the window overlooking the backyard. Her movements were mechanical, as if guided by something invisible. Julia followed her cautiously. She's calling, Amethyst murmured, her voice strangely distant. She wants me to go there. Who's calling? Grandma Hope. She says there are more things buried, important things you need to see. A chill ran down Julia's spine. There was something terribly familiar about the situation, like a scene she had witnessed before. Amethyst, you're sleepwalking. You need to go back to bed. But when she touched the girl's arm to guide her back, Amethyst turned with her eyes suddenly awake and lucid. Julia, you need to go to the farm tomorrow alone. There's a chest buried under the third stone with symbols, the one shaped like a crescent moon. How do you know that? Because I was there when Grandma Hope buried it, on the last day before she left. Julia sat on the bed, trying to process what she had just heard. Amethyst, tell me the truth. Did you really know a lady named Hope? I did. She took care of you for 6 months, and me my whole life. Amethyst climbed onto the bed next to Julia, her posture now completely childish again. She told me a lot of stories about your family, stories your father never told you. What kind of stories? About how you got the farm, about the family that lived there before, about why you have Hope in your middle name. Julia's heart sped up. Her full name was Julia Hope King, but her father had never explained the origin of the second name. He always said it was her mother's choice, who had left when Julia was a baby. What else did she tell you? That your real story is buried with the documents, and that when you're ready, you'll understand everything. The next morning, Julia faced a dilemma. Part of her wanted to ignore Amethyst's words and attribute them to a child's imagination mixed with sleepwalking. But another part, a part that seemed to be growing every day, knew that there were important truths waiting to be discovered. During breakfast, she watched her father flipping through work documents, while Amethyst drew in a notebook Julia had given her. The drawings caught her attention. They were birds, flying around a house she recognized as the main house of Blackwood Farm. Amethyst, have you ever been to the farmhouse? Many times. Grandma Hope used to take me there to show me where you lived before. Arthur looked up from the papers abruptly. What do you mean, where we lived before? We never lived on the farm. Not you, Amethyst corrected calmly. Her family, the Stone family. Stone. Arthur murmured, and Julia noticed a fleeting expression of recognition cross his face. Dad, do you know that name? It's vaguely familiar, maybe from old company documents, but Julia noticed that her father avoided eye contact when he said it. There was something he wasn't telling. That afternoon, while Arthur was at work and Amethyst was napping in the living room, Julia made an impulsive decision. She took the car keys and drove to Blackwood Farm. The 40-mile drive gave her time to question her own sanity, but something stronger than reason pushed her forward. When she arrived at the farm, the first thing she did was locate the stones with symbols that Amethyst had mentioned. There really was one shaped like a crescent moon, a little apart from the others. Using a shovel she found in the property's shed, she began to dig. After 20 minutes of digging under the strong North Carolina sun, her shovel hit something solid. It was a wooden chest, small but heavy, protected by a thick plastic bag. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were old documents, yellowed photographs, and handwritten letters. The first thing that caught her attention was a birth certificate with her name, Julia Hope Stone. Not King, Stone. This can't be right, she murmured, examining the document more closely. The date of birth was correct, but the parents listed were Hope Stone and father unknown. One of the photographs showed an elderly woman with grey hair holding a baby. On the back it was written, Hope and her granddaughter Julia, 6 months old. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. The letters were even more disturbing, all addressed to my dear granddaughter and signed by Grandma Hope. Julia opened one of the most recent ones. My dear granddaughter, I know that when you read this letter, I will no longer be here to explain in person. Forgive me for keeping the truth hidden for so long, but it was necessary for your protection. Arthur King is not your biological father. You are my granddaughter, the daughter of my Rosalie, who passed away shortly after your birth. I raised you in secret for your first few years, but painful circumstances forced me to entrust you to Arthur's care when you were still too young to remember. He does not know the truth. He genuinely believes you are his daughter. The farm where you grew up originally belonged to our family for generations. It was taken from us through methods you will discover when you are ready. Amethyst is your cousin, daughter of my grandson Peter, who also passed away too soon. She was raised by me since she was a baby and knows the whole truth of our story. When you returned to the farm, and I knew you would one day, my plan was to reveal everything, but time ran out faster than I expected. Julia let the letter fall from her trembling hands. The world around her seemed to spin uncontrollably. Everything she had believed about her identity, her family, her life, was a lie. She was a stone, not a king. Amethyst was her cousin, not a mysterious orphan who had appeared out of nowhere. And Arthur was not her real father. But then, why had he raised her as his daughter? And what had happened to the Stone family's property? She continued reading the other letters, each revealing pieces of a complex and painful story. Hope described how she had lost the farm through legal tricks and insider information, but didn't give specific details. An older letter, dated 20 years ago, mentioned a corrupt lawyer and forged documents, but the names were blurred by moisture. As the sun began to set, Julia realized she had spent hours reading and rereading the documents. Her mind was buzzing with questions, and her first reaction was to confront Arthur immediately. But something made her hesitate. If Arthur really didn't know she wasn't his biological daughter, how would he react to the revelation? And if he did know, why had he kept the secret? There were aspects of this story she still didn't fully understand. She decided to keep the documents and go home without mentioning anything. She needed time to process this information and carefully plan her next steps. When she got home, she found Arthur worried in the living room, pacing back and forth. "Julia, where were you? Amethyst woke up asking for you and said you had gone to the farm. Why did you go there alone?" "I just wanted to reconnect with the place where I was found," she lied. "I thought it might bring back some memories." "And did it?" Julia looked at Amethyst, who was watching her with knowing eyes. The child knew exactly what she had discovered. Some vague images, nothing very clear yet. But that night, when she finally managed to fall asleep, Julia was haunted by vivid dreams. Dreams of a grey-haired woman singing lullabies. Dreams of a different house from the mansion where she grew up. Dreams of the smell of homemade cookies and stories about old injustices. When she woke up, she knew the dreams were not just products of her imagination. They were real memories, suppressed for years, finally beginning to emerge. The days following the discovery of the chest were a silent torture for Julia. She watched Arthur during meals, studying every gesture, every word, looking for signs that he might be hiding the truth about her identity. But the man who had raised her as a daughter seemed genuinely unaware of any secret. "You've been strange lately," he commented one morning as they had breakfast. "Ever since you came back from the farm, you seem distant." "I'm just trying to process some things," Julia replied, avoiding his gaze. Amethyst, who was eating cereal silently, looked up and met Julia's eyes. There was a mutual understanding there, a shared secret that weighed on them both. "Dad," Julia said carefully, "do you remember when you adopted me?" "I was very young." Arthur paused with the coffee cup halfway to his mouth. "Adopted? Julia, you weren't adopted. You are my biological daughter, but what about my mother? You never talk about her. Your mother left when you were a baby. It was a very difficult period of my life." His voice was choked with genuine emotion. "I prefer not to relive those memories." Julia felt her heart break. Arthur truly believed she was his daughter. Someone had created a lie so elaborate that he himself had been deceived. That afternoon, while Arthur was at work, Julia confronted Amethyst in private. "You knew he doesn't know the truth. Grandma Hope always said he was deceived too," Amethyst replied, playing with a doll Julia had bought for her. "Someone made him believe you were his real daughter." "But who? And why?" "She said that when you're ready for the whole truth, I should take you to a special place on the farm. A place where there are more answers." "What place?" "The old house. The house where Grandma Hope really lived." Julia felt a shiver. "There's another house on the farm, hidden in the woods. It's where you lived when you were little before everything changed." That night, Julia couldn't sleep. She got up several times, walking through the house, looking at family photographs that now seemed strange. In all the photos of her childhood, she appeared with Arthur, but there was never a woman who could be identified as her mother. It was during one of these nightly walks that she heard voices coming from Arthur's office. It was almost midnight, but a light was on, and she could make out his voice speaking on the phone. "Richard, I need you to speed up the investigation on the stones," he was saying in a low voice. "There's something about this story that's deeply bothering me." Julia moved closer to the ajar door, trying to hear better. "Yes, I found some inconsistencies in the farm's purchase documents," Arthur continued. "Values that don't add up, signatures that seem questionable. And there's this name, Hopestone, that keeps popping up in old reports." There was a pause as he listened to the investigator's response. "No, don't tell Julia any of this yet. I want to be sure of all the facts before involving her. She's been through enough trauma already." Julia backed away silently, her heart pounding. Arthur was investigating the stones on his own. That meant he suspected something was wrong, even without knowing the whole truth. The next morning, she decided to act. "Amethyst, I want you to take me to this hidden house today. Are you sure? Once you see it, You won't be able to pretend you don't know anymore. I need to know the whole truth, no matter how much it hurts." The two left the mansion using the excuse of a trip to the mall. Instead, they drove to Blackwood Farm. Amethyst guided Julia down a narrow trail that went deep into the dense woods, a path she had never noticed before. After a 20-minute walk, they reached a clearing where a simple wooden house stood, with a covered porch and an abandoned garden. The structure was in good condition, as if someone had recently taken care of it. "This was our home," Amethyst said softly. "Yours and Grandma Hope's." Julia approached the porch and was instantly hit by an avalanche of memories. The smell of old wood, the specific creak of the floorboards, the view from the kitchen window. It all came back at once, like a dam that had finally broken. She remembered running on that porch when she was 3 or 4, helping a gray-haired lady bake cookies, listening to stories about birds and about a family that had lost everything unjustly. "Grandma Hope," she whispered, tears starting to stream down her face. "I remember her. She never forgot you," Amethyst said, "even after you were gone." They entered the silent house. The interior was clean and organized, as if someone had carefully prepared it for an important visit. On the kitchen table, there was an envelope with the name Julia, written in familiar handwriting. Inside the envelope, she found a longer, more detailed letter than the others. "My dear granddaughter, if you are reading this, it means Amethyst has managed to bring you here, and that your memories have begun to return. This is the house where you grew up for your first 4 years. I raised you alone after your mother, Rosalie, passed away due to complications in childbirth. You were a cheerful and curious child, always asking about the birds and why we no longer had the big farm where your ancestors had lived. When you were 4, I found out I was sick. The doctors said there was no cure and that I wouldn't live much longer. There were no other relatives able to take care of you, so I made a desperate decision. I knew Arthur King by sight. He had been responsible for the loss of our property, but I also knew he was a lonely man who wanted a family. I sought out Magdalene Fisher, an unscrupulous woman who worked at the county records office, and she created false documents that made it look like you were Arthur's daughter with a woman who had supposedly left town. The plan was for you to have a comfortable and secure life, even if it meant growing up with the man responsible for our misfortune. Against all medical expectations, my illness went into remission and I lived much longer than predicted. For all these years, I watched you from a distance, seeing you grow up in the King Mansion, receiving education and opportunities I could never have offered. But I always planned that when you became an adult, you would know the truth. Blackwood Farm is legally yours by right of inheritance. Arthur bought it through information illegally obtained about our desperate financial situation. The documents proving this are hidden behind the fireplace in this house." Julia stopped reading, her hands shaking violently. Behind the fireplace, she found a metal box containing more documents, contracts with forged stamps, records of suspicious bank transactions, and a cassette tape recording. When she put the tape to play in an old recorder she found in the bedroom, she heard the voice of a man she recognized immediately. It was Matthew Rivers, the accountant who had worked for Arthur 15 years ago. "Arthur, I got the information you wanted about the Stones' financial situation," the voice on the recording said. "They're desperate. The old woman Hope owes money to half the town and has no way to pay. If you make a low offer now, before other interested parties find out about the situation, you can get the property for a fraction of its real value." "Are you sure this information is confidential?" replied Arthur's voice, younger but unmistakable. "Completely. My contact at the bank assured me total secrecy. The Stones don't even know this information was leaked." Julia turned off the recorder, feeling sick. Arthur had stolen the farm from her family using illegally obtained inside information. And then, by a cruel irony of fate, He had ended up raising the very granddaughter of the woman he had wronged. "Did he know?" she asked Amethyst. "Did he know I was a stone when he took me home?" "No." Grandma Hope made sure he never found out. The fake documents were very convincing. That afternoon, when they returned to the mansion, Julia faced the biggest dilemma of her life. Arthur was waiting for her, worried, clearly suspecting she was hiding something important. "Julia, I need to talk to you about some discoveries I've made," he said, guiding her to his office. "What discoveries?" "About the Stone family and about the farm. There are irregularities in the purchase documents that have left me very disturbed." Julia looked at the man who had raised her with genuine love, who had been a dedicated father for 15 years, who now seemed tormented by the possibility of having committed injustices in the past. And she realized the moment for the most painful truth of their lives had arrived. The silence in Arthur's office was deafening. Julia held the documents she had found in the hidden house, her hands trembling as she decided how to reveal the devastating truth that would change both their lives forever. "Dad," she began, the word coming out with difficulty, "I need to tell you some things I've discovered about me, about us." Arthur sat down heavily in his leather armchair, his face already pale with worry. "What did you discover, Julia?" "Do you remember the woman who was supposedly my mother? The one who left when I was a baby?" "Of course I remember. Why are you asking that?" Julia took a deep breath and handed him the original birth certificate. "Because she never existed. My real name is Julia Hope Stone." Arthur examined the document, his expression gradually changing from confusion to absolute shock. This can't be right. You're my daughter. I have all the documents to prove." "Forged documents." Julia placed Hope's letters on the table. "I was raised until I was 4 by my real grandmother, Hope Stone. She created a false identity for me because she was sick and needed to ensure I had a secure future." "Stone," Arthur murmured, the surname echoing like a death sentence. "The family that lost the farm." "That you took from the family," Julia corrected, her voice filled with a pain she hadn't expected to feel. Arthur stood up abruptly, walking to the window. "Julia, you need to understand. I bought that property legally. There were documents, contracts, based on illegally obtained information." She turned on the recorder and played the conversation between Arthur and Matthew Rivers. The sound of his own voice from 15 years ago hit Arthur like a gunshot. He leaned against the wall, all the color draining from his face. "My God, I had completely forgotten about that conversation. You destroyed my family to get the farm. And then, by an irony of fate, you ended up raising the granddaughter of the woman you wronged. Julia, I swear I didn't know. When Magdalene brought you to me, she said your mother had left and you needed care. The document seemed legitimate. Magdalene Fisher was paid by my grandmother to create these fake documents." Arthur turned to face her, tears streaming down his face. "Are you saying that? That all these years? You're not my daughter? Not biologically, but you raised me with love. That has to count for something, Arthur repeated, his voice breaking. "Julia, you are the most important thing in my life. You are my reason for being. And now to find out that—" He couldn't finish the sentence, collapsing into the armchair with the weight of the revelations. "There's more," Julia said softly. "Amethyst is my cousin, daughter of Hope's grandson. She was sent to find me, and so that the truth would finally come out. Amethyst knew too. She was raised by Hope. She knows our whole story." At that moment, Amethyst herself appeared at the office door, as if she knew it was time to join the conversation. "Grandma Hope never wanted to destroy your family," she said in her tiny voice. "She just wanted the truth to come out." Arthur looked at the 4-year-old girl as if seeing her for the first time. "You knew from the beginning that I wasn't Julia's real father." "I knew. but I also knew you loved her for real. Grandma Hope always said that true love matters more than blood. Then why reveal all this now? Why destroy our family? Because there are more families that were harmed, Amethyst replied. And because Julia has the right to know who she really is. Julia approached Arthur, trying to touch him, but he recoiled instinctively. Dad, you're still my dad. None of this changes what we've lived through together. It changes everything, Julia. It changes absolutely everything. His voice was filled with deep pain. How can I look at you now, knowing that I'm the man who destroyed your real family? Because you were also a victim of this situation. You were manipulated. I was greedy, he corrected bitterly. I used inside information to buy a property for much less than it was worth. It may have been technically legal, but it was immoral. That night, none of the three could sleep. Arthur locked himself in his office, drinking whiskey and reviewing all the documents from the farm's purchase. Julia stayed awake, questioning every memory of her childhood, trying to distinguish what was real from what had been built on lies. Amethyst sensed the pain she had caused, even though she was just a child following the instructions of her deceased great-grandmother. The next morning, Arthur had made a decision. Julia, I want you to know that the farm is yours by right. I will arrange for the property transfer immediately. I don't want the farm, she replied. I want my family. I want things to go back to how they were, but they can't go back, can they? Arthur laughed bitterly. How can I continue to be your father knowing that I stole this from you? You didn't steal it. You bought a property using questionable methods, yes, but you didn't know you were harming my specific family. That doesn't lessen the gravity of what I did. It was then that the investigator Richard Miles arrived with news that would complicate the situation even further. Mr. King, I've finished the investigation on the stones, and there's information you need to know immediately. What did you find? The Stone family wasn't the only one harmed. I found records of at least 6 other properties acquired by your company using similar methods. Insider information, questionable documents, desperate families being taken advantage of. Julia felt her stomach churn. 6 other families? Yes. And there's more. Matthew Rivers, the accountant on the recording, is alive and living in Asheville. He kept copies of all the documents as life insurance, as he confessed to me himself. Arthur turned even paler. Is he blackmailing someone? Not directly, but he has evidence that could completely destroy the reputation of King & Sons Construction. What does he want? He hasn't made specific demands yet, but he made it clear that he knows details about all the questionable transactions of the last 20 years. Julia watched the man who had been her father for 15 years crumble before her eyes. The empire he had built was founded on injustice, and now everything was beginning to fall apart. Dad, she said softly, regardless of what happens with the company or the properties, I still want you in my life. How can you say that? How can you want to maintain any relationship with me after knowing what I did? Because you taught me what unconditional love is. Because for 15 years, you were the best father I could have asked for. Because the mistakes of the past don't erase all the good you've done. Amethyst approached Arthur and held his large hand with her small ones. Grandma Hope always said that people can change, that it's never too late to do the right thing. And what would be the right thing now? To repair the damage, Julia replied. To find the other harmed families and find a way to compensate them. That would mean losing everything, the company, this house, our comfortable life. But we would gain our dignity back. Arthur looked at the 2 most important people in his life. One he had discovered was not his biological daughter, the other a part of the family he had wronged, and realized they were right. All right, he said finally. Let's do the right thing, no matter what it costs. But none of them imagined that Matthew Rivers was already setting in motion a plan that would force their hands much more quickly than they expected. Matthew Rivers' plan was revealed the following Monday, when Arthur arrived at the office to find a crowd of journalists and television cameras surrounding the King & Sons construction building. Caroline ran to meet him, her face pale with panic. "Mr. King, they've been here since 6 in the morning. They say they have evidence of real estate fraud involving the company." "How did they find out?" "Someone leaked documents to the press. Documents with your signature and Mr. Matthew Rivers." Arthur managed to enter the building through the back, avoiding the reporters, but he knew it was only a matter of time before the situation exploded completely. In his office, he found over 20 messages on his phone. Clients cancelling contracts, suppliers demanding explanations, banks requesting urgent meetings. When he got home that night, Julia and Amethyst were waiting for him with worried expressions. They had watched the local news, where the story was the top headline. "Dad," I saw on television. "They're saying terrible things about the company." "They're all true," he replied with resignation. "Matthew must have given everything to the press, probably in exchange for immunity or money. What does this mean for us? It means our life as we know it is over." That same night, they received an unexpected visit. Clara Anderson, 67, was one of the people whose properties had been acquired through Arthur's questionable methods. She arrived accompanied by her 2 adult sons and carrying a folder full of documents. "Mr. King," she said in a firm but controlled voice, "I came here because you need to hear in person what your actions have caused my family." Arthur invited her in, knowing this was just the first of many confrontations he would face. Clara sat in the living room, looking around at the luxurious decor with a bitter expression. 12 years ago, you bought our farm in Crestwood County for 1/3 of its market value. You said it was a favor because we were in financial trouble. Mrs. Anderson, Let me finish." Her voice was firm. "What you didn't tell us was that you knew about the discovery of a mineral water spring on the property, information you obtained illegally through contacts at the City Hall." Julia watched the scene with a broken heart, seeing the suffering Arthur's actions had caused real people. "We lost not only our home, but also the source of income that would have supported our family for generations. My husband fell ill with grief and passed away 2 years later. My children had to drop out of their studies to work. Mrs. Anderson, I am so sorry. At the time, I didn't fully understand the consequences. Didn't understand or didn't care." The silence that followed was devastating. Clara continued her painful narrative, detailing every hardship her family had faced in the following years: the poverty, the loss of dignity, the shattered dreams. "I came here tonight because I want to see the face of the man who destroyed my family, and because I want your daughters to know what kind of person raised them." Amethyst, who had remained silent until then, approached Clara. "Do you want your farm back, Mum?" "Child, that's not possible. What's done is done, but he can give it back, he can fix it." Clara looked at Arthur in disbelief. "Is that true? Are you willing to repair the damage?" "I am," Arthur replied, his voice choked. "I don't know how yet, but I'm willing to try to fix everything. And why should I believe you?" It was Julia who answered. "Because I am not his biological daughter. I am the granddaughter of Hope Stone, one of the families he wronged. And even so, he is willing to give up everything to do the right thing." Clara fell silent, processing this unexpected revelation. "You are a stone." "I am. And he raised me without knowing the truth. Then you two were also victims of circumstance. In the following days, the situation deteriorated rapidly. More wronged families came forward, each with their own story of suffering. The construction company lost all its major contracts, employees resigned, and banks began to call in loans early. Arthur spent entire nights calculating his assets, trying to find a way to financially compensate all the affected families. The math was cruel, even selling everything. The company, the mansion, the properties would not be enough to completely repair all the damage. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you," Julia said one of those nights. Finding him in the office, surrounded by papers and calculators. What is it? I received a job offer in New York. An architecture firm wants to hire me. Arthur looked up from the documents. You want to leave? I don't want to, but maybe it's better for everyone. With my salary, I can help pay the compensations. Julia, you are not responsible for my mistakes, but I am part of this family. And families face problems together. Amethyst, who had silently entered the office, climbed onto the chair next to Arthur. Grandma Hope always said that when we do the right thing, the universe helps. What do you mean? She said that when we truly try to fix our mistakes, help appears from unexpected places. The next morning, as if Amethyst's words were prophetic, Richard Miles brought surprising news. Mr. King, I received a strange call last night from a Dr. Franklin Vance. I don't know that name. He's a lawyer specializing in land restitution. He said he read about the case in the press and has an interesting proposal. What kind of proposal? He represents a group of investors interested in creating a sustainable development project in the region. They want to buy all the properties involved in the scandal, but by paying fair values to the original families. Julia's spirits lifted. Does that mean the families could receive adequate compensation? Potentially, yes, and there's more. The project would include job offers for members of the wronged families. Why would they do that? According to Dr. Vance, it's a matter of social responsibility. They want to turn a story of injustice into an example of reparation. For the first time in weeks, Arthur felt a glimmer of hope. When can we meet with them? This afternoon, if you wish. The meeting took place in a Charlotte hotel, where Dr. Vance and two representatives of the investors presented a detailed proposal. The project envisioned the creation of a sustainable rural tourism complex, with the original families as minority partners and direct beneficiaries. It's a generous proposal, Arthur admitted, but I don't understand why they are interested in helping. Dr. Vance smiled. Because one of our main investors was also a victim of questionable business practices in the past. He sees this project as a way to create a positive precedent. And what would my role be in this? You would transfer all the properties to the project in exchange for the guarantee that the families will receive fair compensation. You would not receive money, but you would have the peace of mind of knowing you repaired the damage. Arthur looked at Julia and Amethyst, who were with him at the meeting. And my family? Your daughters would have guaranteed employment in the project if they so desire. Miss Julia as the architect responsible for development, and little Amethyst would have her entire education funded by the project. It was an offer that seemed too good to be true. But when Arthur saw the relief on Julia's face and the hope in Amethyst's eyes, he knew it was the answer he had been looking for. I accept, he said, but I have one condition, that all the wronged families be consulted and agree with the project before any document is signed. Of course. In fact, we have already started contacting them. When they left the meeting, Amethyst held Arthur's and Julia's hands. Grandma Hope was right. When we do the right thing, the universe really does help. But not everything would be as simple as it seemed, for Matthew Rivers still had cards up his sleeve that would drastically complicate the plans for reparation. Matthew Rivers' sabotage came in the form of an anonymous call to Clara Anderson, 3 days before the meeting where all the wronged families would vote on the reparation project. The distorted voice of the ex-accountant planted seeds of distrust that would grow quickly. Mrs. Anderson, you should know that this project is just a way for Arthur King to clean up his reputation without actually losing money, the electronic voice said. The investors are frontmen. He remains the real owner of the properties. Clara hung up the phone, disturbed, but the doubt had already been planted. Similar calls were made to the other 5 families, each containing false but convincing information about supposed manipulations behind the project. When Arthur arrived at the community meeting in the local church hall, he found a hostile environment he hadn't expected. The 6 wronged families were present, but their expressions were of distrust and anger. "Mr. King," said John Stevens, 72, whose farm had been bought for a pittance 8 years earlier, "we have received information that this project is just a sham to protect your assets." "What information?" "That the investors are front companies registered in your name," accused Clara. "That Miss Julia will continue to manage your properties as if nothing had happened." Julia stood up, indignant. "That's a lie. My father is willing to lose everything to repair the damage he caused. Then why not just give us back our properties without this complicated project?" asked Mary Stevens, John's daughter. Dr. Vance tried to explain the legal and financial aspects that made a direct transfer impossible, but the atmosphere of the meeting was irreversibly contaminated by distrust. "We want concrete proof," Clara demanded. "Documents that prove you will have no financial benefit from this project." "You will have them," Arthur promised, "but I need a few days to organize them." "More delays," John muttered. Typical of a corrupt businessman. The meeting ended without resolution, with the families agreeing to meet again in a week. Arthur, Julia, and Amethyst returned home in silence, each lost in their own distressing thoughts. That night, Richard Miles brought news that explained the family's sudden change of attitude. "I managed to trace the anonymous calls. They all came from the same number, registered to a shell company. But the trail leads to Matthew Rivers." "Why would he do that?" Julia asked. "What interest does he have in sabotaging the reparation?" "I found out that Matthew is negotiating with a group of real estate speculators," Richard revealed. "If the reparation project fails and the families take Mr. King to court, these properties will be tied up in litigation for years. During that time, the speculators can buy them for even lower prices, and Matthew gets a commission for facilitating these purchases," Arthur completed with bitterness. "Exactly. He's using the suffering of these families to profit even more." The revelation made Arthur furious. "I need to confront Matthew directly." "Dad, that could be dangerous," Julia warned. "He clearly has no scruples. I can't let him destroy the only chance these families have of receiving justice." The next morning, Arthur drove to Asheville, where Matthew kept a small accounting office in a decaying commercial building. The meeting was tense from the first moment. "Arthur, what an unpleasant surprise," said Matthew, a thin man of 58 with small, calculating eyes. "Did you come to congratulate me on the circus you've created in the press? I came to ask you to stop sabotaging the reparation project." "What project?" "Oh, you mean your pathetic attempt to play the good guy? Matthew, these families have suffered because of our actions. They deserve fair compensation." "Our actions?" Matthew laughed sarcastically. "I just provided information. You made all the decisions, illegally obtained information. Prove it. I have the recordings, which prove nothing more than what you've already admitted publicly." Arthur realized he was dealing with a man completely devoid of conscience. "What do you want, Matthew?" "Money? I want justice. You built an empire using my services and then discarded me when you no longer needed me. Now that everything has collapsed, you want to play the victim? You were fired because I found out you were embezzling money from the company. They never proved it. Because you erased the evidence." Matthew stood up and walked to the office window. "Arthur, you've always been naive. Do you think you can fix decades of greed with a cute little social project? I'm trying to do the right thing. The right thing would be for you to lose absolutely everything, just like those families lost. To be publicly humiliated, to have your reputation destroyed, to live in poverty. And is that what you're trying to do? That's what I'm succeeding in doing." Arthur left Matthew's office more determined than ever to stop his plans. But when he got home, he found an even more serious situation. Julia was crying in the living room, holding a court summons. Amethyst was trying to comfort her with her 4-year-old wisdom. offering a glass of water and words of kindness that sounded far too old for her age. What happened? "The families have filed a class action lawsuit against you," Julia said between sobs. "They're asking for a seizure of all your assets and your arrest for fraudulent conspiracy." Arthur read the summons with a heavy heart. The family's lawyers claimed that the reparation project was an attempt to hide assets and that Arthur should be held in preventive custody. "Matthew completely convinced them," he murmured. "Dad," Dr. Vance called, "the investors are reconsidering the project due to the litigation. They don't want to get involved in a prolonged legal battle." It was exactly what Matthew had planned. Without the reparation project, the families would be dependent on a lawsuit that could last for years, during which the speculators could manipulate the situation in their favor. "Is there any way to reverse this?" Arthur asked. Dr. Vance said that if we can get proof of Matthew's manipulation, we can try to nullify the lawsuit. What kind of proof? Evidence of the anonymous calls, documents about his deal with the speculators, something that shows he's acting in bad faith. It was then that Amethyst spoke up with a maturity that continued to surprise the adults. "I can help with that." "How, dear?" "Grandma Hope taught me how to record important conversations. She always said that when we deal with bad people, we need proof." Julia looked at her, astonished. "Amethyst, did you record a conversation?" "Not yet, but I can record the next time he calls the families." "But that would be dangerous. You're just a child." "Grandma Hope always said that even children can fight for justice when adults fail." Arthur knelt to Amethyst's level. "What do you have in mind? Matthew doesn't know I exist, right? He doesn't know there's a child who knows the whole truth and who can help expose him. It's still too dangerous. It's more dangerous to let him destroy all your chances of repairing the mistakes of the past." That night, the three of them devised a risky plan. Amethyst would call Matthew, pretending to be one of the granddaughters of the wronged families, trying to get him to confess his manipulation. It was a plan that depended on the exceptional intelligence of a 4-year-old child and the arrogance of a man who thought he was smarter than everyone. What they didn't know was that Matthew had already discovered Amethyst's existence and was preparing a trap of his own. The discovery that Matthew knew about Amethyst's existence came via a threatening phone call in the early hours of Thursday morning. Arthur answered the phone at 3 a.m. to the familiar, cruel voice of the ex-accountant on the other end. "Arthur, I hope you and your interesting family are sleeping well," Matthew said with a sarcastic tone that made Arthur's blood run cold. "How did you get this number? I've gathered a lot of interesting information in the last few days. For example, I discovered you have a new daughter, a very special little girl named Amethyst Stone." Arthur's silence confirmed his fears. "Ah, so it's true. The little granddaughter of Old Hope is living with the man who destroyed her family. What delicious irony. What do you want, Matthew?" "I want you to completely give up any attempt at reparation, accept total ruin, and keep your family away from any plan to harm me. And if I don't, then I will ensure that certain information about Amethyst's irregular origins reaches the competent authorities. A child without official documents, raised by an old woman who never registered her. That could create many unpleasant bureaucratic complications." The threat was clear. Matthew would use Amethyst's vulnerable situation as a weapon to keep Arthur in line. "You have until Friday to make your decision," Matthew continued. "Either you give up everything, or the girl may find herself in a very complicated situation with Child Protective Services." When Arthur hung up the phone, his hands were trembling with anger and fear. Matthew had found the perfect way to blackmail him by threatening Amethyst. The next morning, he gathered Julia and Richard to discuss the situation, keeping Amethyst busy with drawings in the next room. "Can he really cause trouble for Amethyst?" Julia asked. "Unfortunately, yes," Richard replied. The girl's legal situation is irregular. Hope never officially registered her. There are no birth documents, no school records. If the authorities start investigating, she could be taken from our custody? It's possible. And placed in a shelter while they try to locate relatives or resolve her legal status. Arthur stood up and began pacing the room. I can't let that happen. Amethyst has already suffered enough. But if you give up on the reparation, the wronged families will never receive justice, Julia reminded him. It was an impossible dilemma. Protecting Amethyst meant abandoning the other families. Fighting for justice meant putting the girl at risk. It was at that moment that Amethyst herself appeared at the office door, holding one of her drawings. Can I show you what I drew? The drawing showed a small bird facing a much larger, darker bird. Despite the size difference, the small bird was not running away. Why isn't the little bird afraid? Julia asked. Because he knows that sometimes the small can beat the big when they fight for the right thing, Amethyst replied with her disconcerting wisdom. Amethyst, Arthur said carefully, if you had to choose between staying safe with us but letting other people suffer or risking your safety to help those people, what would you do? Grandma Hope always said that we can't be truly happy if we know other people are suffering because of us. But you're just a child. You shouldn't have to make such difficult choices. I'm not just a child, she said seriously. I'm a stone, and the stones always fight for what's right. That afternoon, they made a collective decision that would change everything. Instead of yielding to Matthew's blackmail, they would accelerate their plans and try to obtain evidence against him before he could carry out his threats. Richard managed to identify that Matthew was meeting with the real estate speculators on Friday afternoon at a discreet restaurant on the highway between Charlotte and Asheville. It was the perfect opportunity to record an incriminating conversation. How will we get close without being seen? Julia asked. I'll go, Amethyst said simply. Absolutely not, Arthur protested. It's too dangerous. No one suspects a little girl playing alone near a restaurant. And I'm good at pretending I'm just playing. Amethyst, you don't understand the risks. I understand that if we do nothing, Matthew will destroy the other family's chances of getting justice, and then he'll find other ways to hurt you too. After much debate, they devised a careful plan. Amethyst would be on the restaurant's playground, which was close enough to the outdoor tables to pick up conversations, while Arthur and Julia would remain in the parking lot as backup. On Friday, they arrived at the location an hour before the scheduled meeting. The restaurant was a family establishment with an outdoor area and playground, perfect for a child to play unnoticed. Amethyst was equipped with a small recorder hidden in her doll and clear instructions to leave immediately if she felt any danger. When Matthew arrived, accompanied by two men in suits, Amethyst was already playing quietly on the slide, appearing to be just a child whose parents were having lunch nearby. The conversation started low, but gradually the men became more relaxed and their voices became audible. So, Rivers, are you sure you can keep King busy with the lawsuits long enough for us to close the deals? One of the men asked. Absolutely. He's desperate trying to repair the damage, but every move he makes only sinks him deeper. The families are furious. The lawyers are preparing for a long battle, and he doesn't have the resources to fight on all fronts. And how long do you estimate it will take for the properties to become available? If all goes according to plan, in 6 months we can buy everything for a pittance. The families will be so tired of the legal fight that they'll accept any offer. Excellent. And your commission will be 15% on each transaction, as agreed. Actually, I want to renegotiate for 20%. I'm taking considerable risks maintaining this charade. Amethyst continued to play, capturing every word of the criminal conversation. But then something went wrong. One of the speculators noticed that the child was always nearby when they talked business. That girl has been there for a long time. Where are her parents? Matthew looked in Amethyst's direction and his face paled. My God. It's her. Her who? The girl who's living with King, Amethyst Stone. The three men stood up quickly and started heading towards the playground. Amethyst sensed the danger and ran towards the parking lot where Arthur and Julia were waiting in the car. "Let's go! Now!" she yelled, jumping into the back seat. Arthur started the car quickly, but Matthew had already gotten close enough to shout, "King, you made the wrong choice." As they sped out of the parking lot, Amethyst held tightly to the doll with the recorder. "I got everything," she said, breathless but triumphant. But when they got home, they found that Matthew had acted even faster than they imagined. There was a van from Child Protective Services parked in front of the mansion, and official staff were waiting to ask questions about Amethyst's irregular situation. The final battle was just beginning, and now they were fighting against time to use the evidence they had collected before Matthew could tear their family apart. The social worker, Denise Murray, 45, was waiting in the living room when Arthur, Julia, and Amethyst arrived home. Her expression was professional but concerned, and she held a folder full of official documents. "Mr. King, I'm from the Charlotte Department of Social Services. We received an anonymous tip about a child in an irregular situation living at this residence." Arthur exchanged a quick glance with Julia. Matthew had acted with impressive speed. "The girl is well cared for and loved," he said, instinctively placing a hand on Amethyst's shoulder. "I'm sure she is, but we need to verify the child's legal status. According to our information, she has no birth certificate, is not enrolled in school, and there are no official records of her existence." Amethyst approached the social worker with the surprising confidence she always showed with adults. "My name is Amethyst Stone, and I live here with my family. Amethyst, can you tell me where you were born? Who are your parents?" "My parents passed away when I was a baby. Grandma Hope raised me until she passed away too. Now Uncle Arthur and cousin Julia take care of me." Denise took careful notes. "And where is Amethyst's birth certificate?" "Hope never arranged for official documents," Arthur admitted. "She kept the girl hidden from the system. Why? Complex family issues that we are trying to resolve." "Mr. King, I understand the situation is delicate, but a child cannot live without legal documents. Without a birth certificate, she cannot attend school, receive proper medical care, or have any kind of legal protection." Julia spoke up. "We were just in the process of regularizing the situation. We want to adopt Amethyst officially. For that, we would first need to establish her legal identity, locate any possible living relatives, and complete all the legal procedures for adoption." "How long would that take?" "In normal cases, between 6 months and a year. But this case is particularly complex due to the complete lack of documentation." Amethyst listened to the whole conversation attentively, processing the implications with a maturity that continued to impress the adults. "Mrs. Murray," she said, "can I show you something important?" "Of course, dear." Amethyst ran to her room and came back with her doll, from which she carefully removed the small recorder. "I recorded a very important conversation today." Before Arthur could stop her, she turned on the device, and Matthew's voice echoed in the room, openly discussing his fraudulent plans with the speculators. Denise listened to the recording with growing attention. Who are these people? And why was a child recording this conversation? Arthur realized the time had come to reveal the whole truth. "Denise, there is a very complex situation involving real estate fraud, wronged families, and blackmail attempts. Amethyst is not just a random orphan. She is a key part of a quest for justice that is being sabotaged. I need a full explanation." Over the next hour, Arthur and Julia told the whole story. The fraudulent property purchases, the discovery of Julia's true identity, the role of Hope Stone, and the reparation plans Matthew was sabotaging. "It's an extraordinary story," Denise admitted. "But that doesn't change the fact that Amethyst needs immediate legal protection. What happens now Normally, she would have to stay with a foster family or in a shelter while we resolve her legal situation. But Denise paused, clearly conflicted between protocol and what she was seeing before her. But what? It's obvious the child is well cared for and happy here. And this recording suggests there are people trying to harm her for nefarious reasons. Amethyst approached Denise again. "Ma'am, can I tell you a secret?" "You can, dear. Grandma Hope told me that one day bad people would try to separate me from my new family. She taught me to record important conversations to protect myself. Your grandmother was very wise. She also said that when everything seemed lost, good people would appear to help. Are you a good person?" "I'm trying to be, dear." "Then can you help us?" Denise looked at the exceptional child before her, then at Arthur and Julia, who clearly loved Amethyst as a daughter and sister. "I'm going to do something irregular," she said finally. "I'm going to register Amethyst as being under temporary emergency care at this residence, while we investigate both her legal situation and these allegations of fraud. Is that possible? In exceptional cases, when the child's well-being is clearly at risk, if she is removed from the current environment, yes. And how much time do we have?" 30 days to present substantial evidence to justify permanent custody. After Denise left, the family gathered to plan their next steps. Amethyst's recording was powerful evidence against Matthew, but they needed more to completely dismantle his scheme. "We have to give this recording to the wronged families," Julia said. "They need to know they were manipulated." "But how do we convince them to listen to us? They're convinced we're the villains." It was Amethyst who suggested the solution. "What if we go to them with someone they trust?" "Who?" "The priest from the church, where they had the meeting. Grandma Hope always said that when there's a lot of confusion, we should ask for help from people the whole community respects." It was a brilliant idea. Father Michael Stevens, 68, had known all the families in the region for decades and had an unimpeachable reputation for honesty and justice. On Sunday morning, the three went to Mass at the local church. After the service, they asked for a private conversation with Father Michael. "Father, we need your help with a very complex situation," Arthur said. "I'm listening, my son." Once again, they told the whole story. Father Michael listened in silence, asking occasional questions to clarify details. "It's an extraordinary situation," he said at the end. "And you have evidence of these manipulations?" "We do," said Amethyst, showing her recorder. When the priest heard the recording, his expression became grave. "This is very serious. This man is using the suffering of these families to profit even more. Father, the families trust you. Would they listen if you asked them to give the truth a chance?" "Yes, I believe so. I will organize a new meeting for Monday night. Matthew will try to stop it." "Matthew Rivers has no authority in this parish," the priest said firmly. "And if he really did what's on that recording, it is my moral duty to help expose the truth." That night, Amethyst had another of her vivid dreams. She dreamed of Grandma Hope smiling and saying that justice was finally near. When she woke up, she told Julia about the dream. "Do you think Grandma Hope would be proud of us?" she asked. "I'm sure she would," Julia replied, hugging the girl. "You've been braver than any adult. It's not courage. It's just doing what's right." On Monday, however, they discovered that Matthew had learned of the new meeting and prepared a surprise that would test all the limits of their determination and courage. Matthew's surprise arrived in the form of an unknown woman who appeared at the church door at the exact moment the meeting was starting. It was Sandra Owens, 38, who claimed to be a distant cousin of Hopestone and was demanding legal custody of Amethyst. "Father Michael," she said in a firm voice, "I've come to get my great niece. I just found out she is being illegally kept by strangers." Sandra's dramatic entrance caused a stir among the gathered families. Arthur, Julia, and Amethyst were at the front of the church, preparing to present the evidence against Matthew when they were confronted by this new threat. "Who are you, ma'am?" asked Father Michael. "Sandra Owens, second cousin of Hope Stone. I have documents proving my kinship and my legal right to care for Amethyst." She produced a folder with certificates, family trees, and a power of attorney that looked official. "Hope left me a letter before she passed, asking me to take care of Amethyst if anything happened to her." Amethyst watched the woman carefully, her green eyes studying every detail. "Grandma Hope never talked about you. We were geographically distant, dear. But family is family." "If you're really a relative," said Arthur, "why have you only shown up now?" "Because I only found out Hope had passed away last week. And I only discovered Amethyst was with you through reliable sources." Julia immediately saw the connection. "Matthew hired you, didn't he? I don't know who you're talking about." But Amethyst stepped forward with her sharp perception. "Ma'am, can you tell me what Grandma Hope's favorite song was? Well, there were so many." "And what was the name of the pet bird she raised?" Sandra hesitated visibly. "Dear, it's been so many years. I don't remember all the details. Grandma never had a bird. It was just a test." The exposed lie caused a murmur among the people present. Clara Anderson spoke up. "If this woman is lying about knowing Hope, who really sent her here—" It was then that Father Michael took control of the situation. "Sandra, I need to see these documents more closely, and we all need to hear what Arthur has brought to show us tonight." "There's nothing to hear," Sandra protested. "I just came to get my great niece." "The child clearly doesn't recognize you as family," observed John Stevens, "and you arrived just in time to interrupt our meeting. That's no coincidence." Arthur seized the opening. "Father Michael, ladies and gentlemen, we have brought evidence that we have all been manipulated by someone who wants to profit from our conflict." He turned on the recorder, and the conversation between Matthew and the speculators echoed through the church hall. The silence that followed was total, broken only by the sound of people breathing heavily as they processed what they had heard. "My God," Clara whispered. "He used us. He made us fight each other while he planned to steal our properties for even less," added Mary Stevens. Sandra tried to retreat discreetly, but John Stevens blocked her exit. "Where do you think you're going, Mom? You're part of this scheme." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then why did you try to interrupt a meeting about properties that have nothing to do with you?" Amethyst approached Sandra again, this time with an expression serious beyond her 4 years. "Ma'am, Grandma Hope always told me that lying makes people nervous. You're sweating a lot." "Insolent child." "And Grandma also said that bad people get angry when they're found out." Father Michael addressed Sandra with pastoral authority. "My daughter, if you are involved in any scheme to harm these people, this is your chance to tell the truth. I have nothing to confess. Then you won't mind if we verify the authenticity of your documents." Sandra finally yielded under the pressure. "All right. Matthew paid me to come here and take the girl. He said she was being used against him and that I would be rewarded if I took her out of the picture." The confession caused general outrage. Clara rose from her chair, furious. "This man has no limits, using a child as a pawn in his dirty games." "And he almost succeeded," said Father Michael. "If Amethyst weren't so intelligent and brave, he would have torn this family apart and kept you all fighting indefinitely." John Stevens addressed Arthur. "Mr. King, we need your help to understand this whole situation. If Matthew really manipulated us, we want to know the whole truth." "The truth is complex," Arthur began. "I made serious mistakes in the past. I used questionable methods to buy properties, including yours. But I am trying to repair that damage. And we stopped you from doing that because we believed Matthew's lies," said Clara with regret. "You didn't know they were lies. You had every right to distrust me. But now we know the truth," said Mary Stevens, "and we want to hear about this reparation project you mentioned." Dr. Vance, who had been called to the meeting, again presented the details of the Sustainable Development Project. This time, the families listened with genuine attention and interest. "It's a generous proposal," John admitted. "Much better than spending years fighting in court while speculators profit from our misfortune." "And would we all benefit equally?" asked Clara. "Everyone. With proportional participation in the profits and guaranteed jobs for family members who want to work on the project." The families began to discuss among themselves and gradually reached a consensus. "We want to accept the proposal," Clara announced, "but on one condition, which is that Matthew be publicly exposed and prevented from harming other families in the future." "We can guarantee that," said Arthur. "We have enough evidence for criminal and civil proceedings against him." Amethyst, who had watched the entire negotiation, approached the center of the group. "Grandma Hope always said that when people stop fighting and start working together, beautiful things happen." "Your grandmother was very wise," said Father Michael, "and you have inherited that wisdom." Sandra, realizing her plan had completely failed, tried to excuse herself again. "Can I leave now?" "Not until we file a complaint," Clara said firmly. "You attempted to kidnap a child." "It wasn't kidnapping. It was legal, with false documents and fraudulent motives," Dr. Vance corrected. "It is indeed a crime." That night, while Sandra gave her statement at the police station and Matthew received a court summons, the wronged families and the Kings quietly celebrated the end of months of conflict and manipulation. "Dad," Julia said when they got home, "I still can't believe we did it." "We haven't done it yet," Arthur reminded her. "We still have to formalize the project, prosecute Matthew, and resolve Amethyst's legal situation." "But the hardest part is over," said Amethyst, snuggling between Arthur and Julia on the sofa. "Now everyone knows the truth." "And you were fundamental in making that happen," said Julia, hugging the girl. "It wasn't just me, it was family work." Arthur looked at the two most important people in his life. One, he had discovered, was not his biological daughter, but who loved him as a true father, and another, who had arrived as a stranger, but had become essential to his redemption. "Yes," he said softly. "It was family work." But even with the victory over Matthew, they didn't imagine that the biggest revelation of all was yet to come. Hidden in the last of Hope Stone's papers that Amethyst had not yet shown. The final revelation came a week after the victory over Matthew, when Amethyst finally decided to show the last secret Grandma Hope had saved for her. It was a Saturday morning, and the family was organizing the documents for the reparation project when the girl appeared carrying a small wooden box that no one had seen before. "Amethyst, what is that?" Julia asked, observing the box ornamented with familiar symbols, the same ones that were engraved on the stones at Blackwood Farm. "It's the last thing Grandma Hope asked me to keep. She said I should only show it when everything was resolved and our family was safe." Arthur stopped reviewing the contracts and came closer. "What kind of thing?" "The truth about why Grandma Hope really left Julia with you." Arthur's heart sped up. They thought they already knew the whole truth, but apparently there were deeper layers to the story Hope had constructed. Amethyst opened the box carefully, revealing old photographs, more letters, and an official document that looked like a different birth certificate from the others they had found. The first photograph showed a young man next to Hope, both smiling in front of the old farmhouse. On the back was written, "Hope and Robert, 1978. "Who is Robert?" Julia asked. "The real grandfather of you both." Amethyst replied simply, "What do you mean of us both?" Amethyst handed over the different birth certificate. It was for Rosalie Stone, Julia's mother, but it showed information that changed everything. Robert King was listed as the father. Arthur felt the world spin around him. "King. Robert King was my father. Grandma Hope was your real mother-in-law," Amethyst confirmed. "Robert was your father, and Rosalie was her daughter. Julia isn't just a stone, she's a real king too." Julia held the certificate with trembling hands. "Does that mean that you are my biological granddaughter?" Arthur whispered, tears starting to stream down his face. My real granddaughter. But how is that possible? Why did Grandma Hope never tell? Amethyst took one of the letters from the box. This one addressed specifically to Arthur. She wrote, explaining everything. The letter was in a sealed envelope with the name, "For my son-in-law Arthur, when he is ready for the whole truth." My dear Arthur, if you are reading this letter, it means Amethyst has fulfilled her mission, and you have found the path to redemption that I always knew was in your heart. Robert, your father, was the love of my life and the best man I ever knew. When he passed away prematurely, you were only 8 years old, and we lost contact because your mother decided to move away from the painful memories. Our daughter Rosalie grew up hearing stories about Robert's son, the boy she considered her brother at heart, even without having grown up together. When you returned to Charlotte as an adult and successful, Rosalie became infatuated with the idea of meeting you, but was too shy to approach you directly. Fate worked in a strange way. You met without knowing the family connection. You fell genuinely in love. And Julia was conceived from that pure and innocent love. But Rosalie was afraid to reveal the truth about our kinship, fearing it would complicate your relationship. When she passed away due to complications in childbirth, she made me promise to take care of Julia, and that one day, when the time was right, I would reveal the whole truth to you. But then, I discovered your transformation in business, the questionable practices, the greed that was consuming the good man Robert had raised. I decided to wait until you rediscovered the path of honesty and justice. Julia needed to grow up with you, not just as an adoptive father, but as a true grandfather who would learn to be worthy of her again. Everything that happened, your loss of the farm, Julia's upbringing based on false documents, even your reunion through suffering, was carefully orchestrated so that you could find each other when you were both ready for the unconditional love of a true family. Arthur finished reading the letter in absolute silence. Julia was crying, processing the revelation that the man who had raised her with so much love was actually her biological grandfather. "So all these years," she began. "All these years I've been raising my own granddaughter," Arthur completed, his voice thick with emotion. "And you've been loving your real grandfather." "That's why Grandma Hope always said that blood calls to blood," said Amethyst. "You loved each other naturally because you were real family. But why did she make everything so complicated?" Julia asked. "Why not just tell us the truth from the beginning?" "Because you needed to learn to be a good man again," said Amethyst, looking at Arthur. "Grandma said that when she died, you were becoming a person Robert would be sad to see. She wanted you to rediscover your kindness before you knew Julia was your blood granddaughter." Arthur sat down heavily, the full weight of the revelations falling on him. She was right. 15 years ago, I was greedy, cruel, self-interested. I didn't deserve to know I had a granddaughter, but now you've changed, said Julia, hugging him. Grandpa. The word sounded strange, but perfectly right at the same time. Grandpa Arthur, Amethyst repeated, testing the sound of it. I like how that sounds. And you, my dear Amethyst, said Arthur, picking the girl up in his arms, are not just our adopted cousin. You are the person who brought our real family back together. Grandma Hope always said, I had a special mission. Now I understand what it was. That afternoon, the three of them went to the county records office, where Magdalene Fisher had created the false documents years ago, this time to officially correct the records and establish the legal truth of their kinship. The current clerk, Carla Roberts, 52, was fascinated by the story. In 30 years of working here, I've never seen anything like it. A family story that seemed like a lie, but was true, hidden by documents that seemed true, but were a lie. Can you correct everything officially? I can. With DNA proving the kinship and the original documents you've brought, we can establish that Julia is legally Julia Hope Kingstone, biological granddaughter of Arthur Coleman King. And Amethyst, With Arthur being Julia's biological grandfather and Julia wanting to adopt Amethyst as a sister, we can establish a family adoption that will give the girl full legal rights. When they left the office with all the papers in order, Julia asked a question that had been bothering her since the revelation. "Grandpa, do you think my parents, Robert and Rosalie, would be proud of what we've become?" Arthur thought carefully before answering. "I think they would be proud that we found our way back to each other, and especially that we learned that family is about love, forgiveness, and doing the right thing." "And Grandma Hope?" asked Amethyst. "Grandma Hope got exactly what she wanted," said Julia. "A family united by truth, justice, and love." That night, for the first time since everything had begun, the three of them slept with the feeling that all the secrets had finally been revealed and that their family was complete and true. But the next morning would bring the last surprise of all, one that would definitively consolidate their new life together. 6 months later, Blackwood Farm had been transformed into something none of those involved could have imagined at the beginning of this whole journey. The Sustainable Development Project was flourishing, the wronged families had become prosperous partners in the enterprise, and a new community based on justice and cooperation was being born. Arthur walked through the property on a sunny spring morning, observing the extraordinary changes. Where there were once only empty fields, there was now a rural tourism complex that attracted visitors from all over North Carolina. The old house where Hope had raised Julia was restored and transformed into a cultural center that told the story of the region and the families who had lived there. "Grandpa, come see!" shouted Amethyst, now 5 years old and officially Amethyst Kingstone, running towards him with a drawing in her hands. "What did you draw this time, my little artist? It's our whole family together at the new farm." The drawing showed smiling human figures in front of the restored house, but this time it included many more people. Clara and her family working at the rural inn, John Stevens managing the organic agricultural production, Mary Stevens coordinating tourist activities, and Dr. Vance overseeing the project's expansion. "It's beautiful. But where's Julia? She's coming." As if summoned by the drawing, Julia appeared driving the jeep she used to supervise the project's expansion works. At 20, she had become a respected architect, specializing in sustainable development, and her work on the farm was attracting attention from other municipalities interested in similar projects. "Grandpa, Amethyst, I have incredible news," she said, getting out of the vehicle with a radiant expression. "What news?" "The project was selected to receive a national award for corporate social responsibility. We're going to Washington, D.C. next week." "Does that mean other people will know our story?" asked Amethyst. "It means our story will inspire other families and other communities to find ways to repair injustices and build something good from past mistakes." Arthur hugged his 2 girls, feeling a deep gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. King & Sons construction had been officially closed, but in its place, something much more valuable had been born. A united family, and an example of how redemption was possible through love and justice. "There's something else I need to tell you," said Julia, with a mysterious smile. "What?" "I received a call from Dr. Vance today. 3 other regions in North Carolina want to implement projects similar to ours, and they want me to coordinate all of them." "That's wonderful," exclaimed Arthur. "You're going to help many other families." "We're going to help," she corrected, "because I want you to be my official partners. Grandpa as a consultant in corporate responsibility, and Amethyst as our community specialist. She has a special gift for understanding what people really need." Amethyst grew serious for a moment, processing the proposal. "Does that mean we're going to travel to help other families like ours?" "Exactly." "Grandma Hope would be proud," said the girl, and for the first time in months she mentioned her great-grandmother without sadness, only with affection and recognition. That afternoon, as they walked through the gardens of the restored farm, they found Clara tending to the flowers near the well where it all began. The site was now a small memorial with a plaque that read, "In memory of Hope Stone and all the families who lost their land, and in celebration of restored justice." "Clara, how are things with your family?" asked Arthur. "Prosperous, Mr. King. My children are studying again. My husband would have been proud to see our farm become part of something so beautiful." She paused, wiping her hands on the soil. Who would have thought that the man who once caused us so much suffering would become our partner in creating something so special? "People can change," said Amethyst, with her particular wisdom. "Grandma Hope always said that. Your grandmother was very wise, and she was right about many things." As the sun began to set over the North Carolina mountains, the family gathered on the porch of the restored house for the ritual that had become a tradition. Amethyst told a story about Grandma Hope, Julia read excerpts from the diaries they had found in the house, and Arthur shared memories of his father Robert that were gradually returning to his memory. "Grandpa," said Amethyst that night, "do you think Grandma Hope knew it would all end like this?" "I think she had hope," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "And I think she believed that deep down, people are capable of finding the right path when they have enough love to guide them." "And did we find it?" "We found it, all of us." Julia joined the conversation. "You know what impresses me most about this whole story?" "What?" "How a 4-year-old girl managed to reunite a family, expose a criminal, inspire a social justice project, and still find time to draw birds." Amethyst laughed, a crystal-clear sound that echoed through the Carolina night. "I didn't do anything special. I just did what Grandma Hope taught me. Always tell the truth, always help those who are suffering, and always believe that people can be better than they are. Those are lessons we should all learn," said Arthur. That night, after Amethyst fell asleep, Arthur and Julia stayed on the porch talking about the future. The project had grown beyond their most optimistic expectations, but more important than the financial success was the human impact they were creating. "Grandpa, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you have regrets about how our story began? About the mistakes you made?" Arthur thought for a long moment. "I have regrets for the suffering I caused, but I have no regrets about the journey that brought us here. If I hadn't made those mistakes, I might never have learned the value of redemption, and I certainly would never have discovered I had a wonderful granddaughter. And I would never have discovered I had a grandfather who loves me so much that he was willing to lose everything to do the right thing." A year later, when the project had expanded to 7 different regions and helped more than 40 families regain their dignity and prosperity, Amethyst made one last special drawing. It was a map of North Carolina, dotted with small, colorful houses, each representing a family that had found justice and hope. In the center of the drawing was Blackwood Farm, shining like a sun that radiated light in all directions. And flying around everything were dozens of colorful birds, no longer the sad, trapped birds she drew at the beginning of her journey, but free, joyful birds, singing with happiness. At the bottom of the drawing, in her still childish but firm handwriting, Amethyst wrote, "For Grandma Hope, who always knew that love is stronger than pain, and that justice always finds a way." When she showed the drawing to Arthur and Julia, the 3 hugged together, knowing that they had not only found their family, but also their purpose, to prove that even from the most painful and complicated circumstances, it is possible to build something beautiful, just, and full of hope. The little Amethyst, who had appeared barefoot in Arthur's office months before, carrying unimaginable secrets and suffering, had become the architect of a new reality, where broken families could be rebuilt, where past mistakes could be transformed into bridges to a better future, and where a brave child could teach adults about the true meaning of unconditional love. And so, under the starry North Carolina sky, the Kingstone family slept peacefully, knowing that their story had found not just a happy ending, but a new beginning full of infinite possibilities. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.